Everybody, thanks for attending. What this meeting today is a public input session for the revisions that the town of Harwich is doing with the comprehensive wastewater management plan. Just turn it over to Dan for a few housekeeping items.
So
Yeah.
Dan Pelletier, your water wastewater superintendent. So this, just want to let everyone know that this is going to be live broadcast and recorded. The Board of Health does have a mask mandate. It looks like everyone still has their masks on, so we're good there. Just as far as format, we're going to give a quick introductory presentation with some background and just some of the progress we've made to date, and then we're going to jump into the public input session. That said, this really is meant to be a listening session. We want to get the public's input on, what you guys think and how you feel about the CWMP changes that you may want or things that you would like to see done differently. We're not here to present a plan today. We didn't want to be presumptive and come here to provide you something without getting your input first. So like I said, this really is an input session. So once we get through the presentation, people wishing to make comment, if you could do it at the podium and just state your name and where you're from so we can document that. And I think that is it.
Okay. All right, so just to introduce myself, my name is Cwmp. I'm an engineer with the company GHD. GHD was retained by the town of Harwich to make revisions to the 2016 Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan. And what a comprehensive wastewater management plan is and why the town does it, it's basically, as it's set up here, it's a management plan to develop support for the town vision for growth, not a zoning plan. So I'm going to translate that into English. Basically, a CWMP, it's about, 1.5, 2-inch thick document that has typically, sat on a shelf. So people ask, why do the towns invest this much money in it? Is because there's some specific reasons. What it does is it provides a roadmap for the town's wastewater planning for the next 20 years. Obviously, why it's important for the town of Harwich is that you're starting this wastewater endeavor right now. There's a lot of future projects coming down the line. And we need to know what accurate budgets are so we can do planning, and we have to make sure we're doing the projects in accordance with the vision of the town. So some of the reasons why we do this plan, for example, if the town has a completed CWMP, they're eligible for 0% financing through SRF loans for the state. And what that means is that, for example, if the town has $100 million of future sewer infrastructure, if you were to take that out through a traditional loan at a 2%, which is what the state offers, you're looking at about $200,000 for every $1 million financed. So if you looked at a $100 million project, there could be potentially $20 million of interest at 2%. So if the town can get 0%, you've saved $20 million. So people ask, why do you spend so much money on a CWMP? I think our contract was for $229,000 for the revisions because it could potentially help you save millions of dollars in the future. So that's really one of the main drivers. And the Board of Selectmen, they do have to adopt the CWMP for the town. In order for them to adopt it, it has to be done hopefully correctly with the input from the residents, which again is why we're here today. Next slide. What has been done? So in 2016, there was a CWMP completed. We have identified several areas that need improvements on that plan. Some of that, well, that's actually the next slide. So going back to this slide, what we've done since 2016, we've looked at partnership opportunities with other communities, surrounding communities. We've got new data from the Muddy Creek Culvert Widening Project. We have updated modeling information from SMAST. The town of Harwich participated with the Pleasant Bay Alliance with the Pleasant Bay Watershed Permit. And we've done the initial sewer implementation of, I think it's phases 2 of some of the sewer infrastructure that's been put in the ground of East Harwich. Some of the topics we've identified for the revisions of the CWMP, for example, the CWMP has to include zoning and build-out assumptions. And this is interesting because I have gotten numerous comments from residents that ask about future growth, how much more flow is going to be recommended in this CWMP. And really the CWMP, it does not project a future flow for the town of Harwich. Basically, the town develops that through their planning department, zoning, what the economic interest or what the other interests of the town may be. But as consultants, we basically ask for, okay, we build the model with your existing water use information. How much more do you want us, how much more capacity do you want us to plan for? Obviously, growth is a very sensitive subject. So we do rely on the town for that. So while we're happy to hear comments and questions about growth, it's not the engineer, it's not the consultants that come up with that number. We work with the town to develop that number. Ongoing evaluation of innovative alternative systems. We're going to take a closer look at the IA systems, give them a fair shake through this report, identify areas in town where they may be feasible to help address the nitrogen issues. And when we say IA systems, that's innovative alternative for traditional Title V septic tanks. But there's also some IA systems for traditional centralized treatment facilities. So we're going to look at all sorts of innovative and alternative technologies and present that in the revised CWMP. And then again, we're going to relook at the implementation of the phasing plan and the costs for these certain plans. Some of the overwhelming comments I've had so far to date is that the 2016 CWMP projected sewering north of the Great Sand Lakes in 2048. And almost every comment from the first public session was that that's too long. So we do understand that concern. We're going to address that in the CWMP, and we address that through looking at potential rephasing and steps that can be done to hopefully meet the comments of the public. Next slide. So our targeted revision process, this is the first step. We get the input from the residents. And when we say we document the comments, some of you might be asking, well, I don't see a notepad up there. Are you really writing down all the questions? Because this is recorded, what we do is we'll rewatch the recording, take down everyone's name, what the nature of the comment was, and then present to the Board of Selectmen, okay, through the 2 meetings, through phone calls, emails I've received, Dan's received, we've had 200 comments. And here's a breakdown of what, the gist of the comments are. There might be 1 comment on this, there might be 150 comments on this. So we summarize, this is the input that we've gotten from the town. So we are going to go back and watch this meeting, go comment by comment, and document that. Once we get the comments, we start working on the draft language of the revised CWMP, and then we put that together, a presentation for the Board of Selectmen. And in each one of these steps, so we get your comments at 2 meetings, we revise language. If anybody in the public is still unhappy with that language or have further comments, you can still comment. It's not like this is your only time. If someone doesn't say something here, it's done and forgotten. I did leave some of my business cards on the back table. So however you want to get the comment to the town is acceptable, whether it's an email to myself, email to the Board of Selectmen. There's a lot of different venues. So if anyone's still uncertain with this process moving forward, how public comment is required or how it's received, feel free to reach out to me and I can help you make sure that your comments are harbored. So after the draft language and the board approves the revisions, we submit that to the regulatory agencies, to the state, and that's where the revised plan basically gets adopted by the state at that point. We're really trying to have these revisions done at some point mid to late summer, so it's something we want to get done this year. We know we have a lot of work to do, but we want to keep this moving along quickly with the support of the public and the stakeholders. Good. Next slide. And just to reiterate, the first, we had a virtual session a week or 2 ago. Maybe 25, 30 residents attended that. And almost every comment, other than the first comment, which just asked at the next session if you could give a little background, which is why we're doing this today, every other comment was regarding the Great Sand Lakes. I did have a few other phone calls regarding concern for Skinnequit Pond as well. So it tells me what I'm hearing so far from the residents is freshwater bodies need to be addressed better. So loud and clear, but please feel free to come up and comment further today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan. He'll give a little more background, then we're going to open it up to the comments.
Yeah, so just to speak to kind of the history of what the CWMP is based on, and also the basis for our watershed permit. So going back to 2001, the Massachusetts Estuaries Project was started. And if you look at the screen, or blue, purple, I don't know what it looks like out there, are actions taken by the town, and the green items on the bottom are the various MEP reports that were developed to inform the nitrogen removal requirements that are contained within our CWMP. So after adopting the CWMP in 2016, it wasn't short thereafter that we diverged from the timeline in that CWMP. We did the Muddy Creek Inlet, we appropriated designs for Phase 2 in 2017, and then it was at the 2018 town meeting, the residents approved an article to authorize the Board of Selectmen to pursue a DHY Clean Waters Partnership. That partnership was never identified in the CWMP, so that kind of speaks to why we're going through the CWMP revision process, because things have transpired since that document was adopted. Moving on, so the table on the left here is what everyone who's been following along for the past several years is likely familiar seeing. This is the old phasing plan and financial cost model that was in the original CWMP. So what we're hoping, or what we will have at the end of the CWMP revision process, is new maps with a new phasing and new cost modeling.
And I'll just add one thing. I understand that table is extremely difficult to read. So I'm going to ask I'm going to request that the slideshow be put up online so we can take a look at it. Because there's a lot of good information in this table here. It is a good timeline, and unfortunately, it's just looked a lot bigger on this screen when we saw it. So apologies for that.
But on the right side of the screen there is really Phase 1 of our CWMP, which was the widening of the Muddy Creek Bridge between the town of Harwich and Chatham. Next, here we have a representation of Phase 2, Contracts 1 and Contract 2. So Contract 1 is highlighted in the blue parcels, Contract 2 is highlighted in the red parcels. Beyond those two Phase 2 construction contracts, we have appropriated money this past town meeting for the design of a collection system in the Pleasant Bay and Round Cove sub-watersheds in East Harwich. And that's really what the CWMP is intended to accomplish, and really the actions that we've taken so far to date. And I guess at this point, unless you have anything else you'd like to add, we would start to turn it over to the public input portion of the meeting, and welcome anyone to step up and.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that this is truly a public input session, so we generally are not going to respond to questions, answers. Of course, I've already distributed my information. Dan's, we'll stick around afterwards for some parking lot talk if anybody wants to talk further, but just to truly keep the theme of this project, we are just going to accept the comments, and once the comment is done, we'll ask for the next resident to come up with their comments. Any volunteers for number 1?
Thanks for breaking the ice.
I'm so nervous. Sorry. I know I've been outspoken, but I'm looking forward to just getting to really explain things, because I'm always feeling like if I go too long, they'll cut me off, and I have to try and make it brief. But I prepared my really deep concerns to share. That a couple years ago, I did invest a lot of time reading our CWMP, like not just the summary, but really reading a whole bunch of it, not completely. And reading the Massachusetts Estuary Project documents, even their technical documents explaining how they did the science, and especially the Pleasant Bay one mainly. The CWMP that we have from CDM Smith is a shoddy document. I know that's, a strong statement. It's repetitive, it obscures data rather than clarifying it, and I've heard from people who work in that field that they are known to they have kind of a boilerplate or a template, and they just plug in different towns' information, and they produce kind of anyway, so the estimates were way off, the work that we've begun to do, that could be partly related, but the things that the very foundations of the work, which begins with public outreach and education, CDM Smith alienated those who tried to participate, especially, I think, the entire wastewater implementation advisory committee, -1, quit because they ignored documents that they produced. They put in tons of time. Questions were ignored. Currently, right now in town, many residents struggle to understand the details about how all of these things work. I talk to people about it, and a lot of people just believe that they aren't capable of understanding it. I think that is related to a failure, an ongoing failure. I don't think people are incapable of understanding it. It is, it takes work, but people are concerned, and they're worried about costs. They're worried about environmental impacts. They're trying to engage, and they decided that, this is too much. I'm really glad you're reading those things, Clara, but I think that's something we need to address. People are feeling that they have to depend on experts to guide, or alternatively, people feel like they're the helpless pawns of so-called experts. That's what I'm finding. Few people can discuss the details in a way that would allow for any authentic community input. They have to understand it to have an input into it. If you show us a chart and it says, it's $1 million to do this, it's $10 million to do that, what do you guys want to do? That's not public input. That's like propaganda. Different options could be explained clearly. At a recent selectmen's meeting where they had an update on wastewater issues, they were talking about additional sewering in Upper Muddy Creek, which is a sub-watershed. Board members and even Dan were talking about things that are not really scientific, like they were talking about the pros and cons of plastics in the ground when discussing whether IAs were going to be useful in a certain subdivision recently done. Now, we could evaluate plastics in the ground in a sewer system versus an IA system, but that hasn't been done, and it wasn't a data-driven comment. They also said that we should just pick it up if we're going by, because I'm sure that's more efficient. I mean, it could be more efficient, but we would have to evaluate whether it's more efficient, and efficient towards what goal? What is the goal that we're trying to efficiently reach? I'm sure it's efficient as far as the flows in the pipes, but there's it's complex, and there's other issues that weren't being made clear. They also kind of made it sound like the MEP numbers are just all over the place, and we probably should just oversewer because the MEP might change their things might change. And when these type of comments obscure people's ability to understand what's going on and participate, makes it just sound overwhelmingly confusing, and it's not helpful. They also talked about, what if the Chatham Break sand begins to shift? This is something the Pleasant Bay Alliance has discussed. It's real, and it does affect the nitrogen levels in Pleasant Bay, but it doesn't particularly affect Upper Muddy Creek watershed any more than it affects the rest of the Pleasant Bay watersheds. It actually probably affects it less because it's Upper Muddy Creek, so it's farthest away from tidal flushing. Things like that. They throw out things that people don't have a lot of background on, and to support their foregone conclusion that they want to put more sewer in Upper Muddy Creek, and they don't really bring the public into the conversation by doing things like that. That's not GHD's fault, but it is a public concern that I feel this is a chance to talk about. My second thing is that I'd like to see the evaluation of IA technology and of land use controls revisited. And you mentioned that you're going to give a fair shake to IA. IA means innovative alternative. It can include a whole bunch of different things, but usually when we talk about it, we mean denitrifying septic systems, which are like our regular Title Vs, but with extra ability to remove nitrogen. In our current CWMP, there's this statement, it's kind of like a logical fallacy. It says, continued use of Title V septics plus a moratorium on growth would not achieve the needed nitrogen removals. Agree, right? Nobody thinks Title V septic systems will achieve the needed removals. So they've got that statement, and then they say right after it, but if we use innovative alternative septics with a 41% build-out scenario, this is for East Harwich, we still wouldn't achieve the TMDLs. And therefore, sewers are the only viable option. I mean, it just makes you say, okay, isn't there some other combinations of those factors that you didn't even mention, like the obvious one? What about land use controls? In addition to innovative alternative septics, where would that leave us? How far off from our goals would we be? Nobody knows because it wasn't done. Obviously, time has passed since that evaluation. Eastward Companies and others have added many subdivisions to East Harwich. But what if a sincere look at that time in the past had shown that areas could implement land use controls, which means limiting future housing construction, plus innovative alternative septics, and sewers wouldn't have been needed, or they could have been avoided in parts of that region. Voters might have chosen that. It might have been more cost effective. It might have been more desirable for other reasons, like quality of life reasons. But that information was never given to us, so we couldn't make that choice. Those are the kind of things that I want to see revisited, even though, as I said, it may be too late with some of the development that's continued to progress. Another thing that innovative alternative systems can refer to is eco-toilets or compost toilets. The CWMP that we haven't currently dismisses these in one sentence. It says they are not appropriate for cultural reasons. They are by far the least expensive and most ecologically beneficial solution to nitrogen pollution and phosphorus pollution, which gets back to the ponds, the phosphorus in the ponds. How much do Harwich voters know about them? How much do they know about the new modern Western versions that are available? If we dismiss them without any attempt to make people aware what's available today and their many benefits, then we haven't evaluated our options. I like to see them included in some of the graphs that we see that show the costs and the nitrogen removal rates. If you had them on a graph, people would say, hey, what's that really, really low line at the bottom that costs so little and achieves the goals? Pardon me. They're not culturally appropriate, though. I want to know if gentrification and longtime families moving away from the area is culturally appropriate. I want to know if the loss of wetland ecosystems is culturally appropriate. High taxes and wealth disparity, is that culturally appropriate? Is the push for high-density mixed-use development culturally appropriate for Harwich? How did CDM Smith decide and define what was culturally appropriate and just dismiss this? Even the Department of Environmental Protection from Massachusetts, in their comment letter, number 13, they said, you really need to evaluate these a little bit better. You didn't really even look at them. Many Cape Codders are also growing in awareness and conviction that any real solutions to our environmental catastrophes involve lifestyle change. Perhaps more of a lifestyle like frugal old-time Cape Codders used to idealize, maybe a little bit less like that of retired millionaires. These kind of things might actually start to help ecology. So I would just really say we can't just dismiss it as culturally appropriate. We have to look at it. Maybe people don't want it, but we should look at it. The next thing that's related is high-density mixed-use development. This is the darling solution that we're hearing pumped up by expert advisors at every turn lately. I want to frame the big picture of our water pollution situation. Exponential growth, deforestation, reckless development, these are the underlying causes of the excess nitrogen. I know it comes from the septics, and they're the largest contributor, but in a sense it's because of the quantity of septics related to development, as well as the green lawns, the loss of forests, and the filtration of the topsoil, the runoff from paved surfaces and rooftops. So all Cape Codders, all along, who are concerned about protecting the ecosystems, the land and aquatic ecosystems, have known that this level of overdevelopment is harmful. It's ecologically harmful and that there will be consequences. But the economic forces couldn't be stopped, we're told. There's money to be made and people have a right to make it. The resulting pollution is now everybody's problem. It costs everyone. But the profitable conversion of forests to suburbs brought in so much money it became a way of life. We have difficulty envisioning an end to that. The Cape Cod Commission and others euphemistically call it an economic necessity. Environmental concerns led to the creation of these TMDLs, these nitrogen limit numbers that we're forced to comply with. Lots of money was spent and researchers attempted to turn a highly complex living dynamic ecosystems health, involving, the benthic animals and the eelgrass and acidification, all kinds of different factors. They try to boil it down into a few numerical values so that the economy could be forced to confront the now quantified harmful effects of its so-called progress. That, to me, is the essence of why this was all done. Sorry. The crowding, the environmental degradation, and even the loss of year-round residents are all part of this excessive growth. Yeah, I was going to read something from the paper, and I think I forgot to copy in my note to go to it. I have something here that even the affordability crisis has been co-opted as proof that we need sewers. From the recent Cape Cod Chronicle article, Selectmen Hope Zoning Changes Can Boost Housing. I'm going to just read this one section. Eidman also said, the town can use sewer availability to increase housing stock. The town uses flow regulations from the Board of Health and Title V, but there are towns that look at flows sent to treatment plants. The Title V numbers are usually very different, he said. Once sewer treatment information has matured, the town might be able to make adjustments for infilling development based on those figures instead of the lot size. Wastewater is really the limitation to guide development in town, said Eidman. So they're trying to separate our concerns about development from the wastewater, but they are inextricably connected. I know it's not up to GHD to make those calls, but we're trying to talk to the town in general through this forum and through GHD. This is a part of the planning. It's an essential part of the planning. This is from the Cape Codder story about affordable housing. Advocates for higher density housing. Finally, don't underestimate community engagement. Infrastructure is important, and the sewers will provide much of that. Basically, we're going to be able to build these apartment complexes that we absolutely have to have to deal with the affordability crisis, thanks to sewers. We need to reevaluate and explore land use control options. I don't really believe this narrative that sewers are God's gift to save the environment and to enable affordability for us and our children. I'm skeptical. We need to know the costs of these options, all the different options, how best to protect vulnerable year-round populations from footing the bill that was incurred by developers to begin with. The developers and the millionaires that they build for are able to handle the tax increases. It's the people who aren't able to handle the tax increases that we need to really think about when we look at the funding of the whole thing. We need skepticism, we need plenty of discussion, critical thinking, and basically that's what I hope to see in this revision. I think it may be optimistic, but
Thanks, Claire. And just for the address for the record?
Pleasant Bay Road, East Harwich.
Thank you. Just to touch upon the first, I know I said I wasn't going to answer, and I'm not, there was kind of two. I have a track record doing this, say I'm not going to answer, then answer. But Claire made a very good point at the first with the public input session. So the reason why we don't, they teach college courses on this sort of thing. It can be, I understand that wastewater is a massive project to the majority of people in town. I've had the luxury of doing this for the last 20 years, so I'm very used to it. But that's part of the reason why I hand my phone number out, is because I had a conversation with a resident that called me and said, what is nitrogen again, and why is it a bad thing? And then that might be very different. Everybody I speak with has a different understanding of wastewater. The majority of my conversations go 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Why that also helps me, though, is I get to understand the concern of the residents when I talk to them at length like that. So please, for anyone that's uncertain about anything they've heard, if you want to learn more, feel free to contact me. Or if you're having trouble sleeping, I always say that I'll put you to sleep after about 5 minutes of my dissertation. But seriously, if you have questions or concerns, call me. And I want to make sure that you're happy with the answers or just how this whole process works. It could be a 5-minute question. It could be an hour long. So thank you, Clara. Sandy?
Thank you, Russ. My name's Sandy McClarty, East Harwich. All right. My wife is so eloquent. You're not going to get that right now, but so we need to understand why we're doing this revision in order to determine if we're successful or not. Dan mentioned some of the reasons why we're doing this, and one of the, I guess the elephant in the room is there were some mistakes as well. This is a living document. Yes, we're going to have to update as we go over the 20 years, but everybody who's involved with this in the weeds knows there's been some mistakes. As Clara pointed out, they didn't evaluate all the scenarios. We need to learn from those mistakes. We have to, so we don't make those same mistakes again. We've got to evaluate, just to reiterate, all the IA systems. I mean, I know there was at one point talk of John Todd's living machines that could address, say, ponds. And I know the 2016 Cwmp didn't really focus on phosphorus in ponds, but you know, let's look at, put it all on the table. That was, I think, the spirit of the document from the beginning. Let's put IAs on the table. Look at the different, you know, to me, land use is a huge part of this because it underpins, you know, why we're in this mess to begin with. So, and that's to my point that let's see where we went wrong, so we don't keep going down that that path. There's been, you know, like I said, sloppy data, and it's not just CDM Smith. The Pleasant Bay Alliance, which I have a lot of respect for, has saddened me with some sloppy data. They put together some ideas for nitrogen trading with Brewster, and this is, you know, part of the discussion. It's what people are getting. So when they form their ideas of the different options, they're getting these numbers. Oh, it's $700, $750 per pound for an IA system. It's half the cost for sewers. And that, you know, it's a very simple statement. People can latch onto it. They don't know that, they haven't gone into the weeds. And then really discussion after that is pointless. It's kind of a settled fact. As I went through carefully the analysis of the Task 1A form and the documents from Pleasant Bay, they failed to include the tie-in costs for the sewer. This was a $10+ million mistake. I met privately with the creators of this document, didn't really get anywhere. I sent an email to probably 50+ people in the Pleasant Bay Alliance group and didn't get a satisfactory response, and that's why I'm publicly saying it now. I want an answer. Were the tie-in costs included, and why not? When they looked at the IA systems, and I'm not going to go through all of these, I have a letter if anyone wants it. The DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, with these innovative systems has extra monitoring requirements. And they say for 2 years, every month you got to go out there and visit. And if, you know, you can prove that you're good, and if there's electronic devices to remotely monitor it, then we can talk about foregoing that monthly visit. Well, as far as I can tell, they extrapolated that cost for 20 years, which, again, I think most people would look at that and say, no, the technology's there. We can do better. I think that cost is inflated. And then it really irks me that they would use different water flow rates for IAs versus sewers. And so just to try to make it simple, if your calculations are based on more water, well, you're treating more nitrogen. You're going to get better results. So if IAs are only treating, say, 152 gallons per day per parcel, and then you turn around and say, well, the sewer system's going to treat 200 gallons per day per parcel, you're not holding things constant. And so, yes, you're going to remove more nitrogen if you're treating 200 gallons per day. Again, trying to, and I'm going to leave it at that. There's more to it. I have a lengthy letter, but these are things that I want to put publicly. I want answers for these things. And again, my ire is not directed at GHD. It's just my frustration to say, when we go through this, let's not make the same mistake, so that at the end of the process, we can all move forward and get this job done. At the end of the day, we want to clean our environment. I think that is most people's concerns. And so that brings me to my final point. We need a clear mission. And I think GHD has outlined some of this already in the presentation, I think August 30th or something, or maybe a previous one. Is this for the environmental reasons? Is this for development? Obviously, there's probably a mixture of that, but what is our end goal so that at the end of it, we're not looking back and saying, wait a minute, let's go back to the drawing board. And so if our primary goal is to clean the water, you would think you would clean the dirtiest parts first, right? Saquatucket Harbor, Witchmere Harbor, Allen Harbor. No, we're going after Upper Muddy Creek, one of the more sparsely populated, not Round Cove, Pleasant Bay. This Muddy Creek area is the area that is most attractive to developers. It includes the Stop and Shop area, Hall's Path. It goes across, if you look at that, behind Meservi's, behind the Stag property. There is a ton of land, in my opinion, that can be destroyed in this watershed. And if you look at the chart that's conveniently there, under the second column, required nitrogen removal per MEP, Upper Muddy Creek shows 584 kilograms per year. If you slide over to the third column in the same row, 2010 attenuation rates before the Jackknife Cove work, 855 kilograms. That's kind of what we've removed on the old attenuation rates. With the new attenuation rates, 1,769 kilograms per year have been removed. That doesn't include Whittier Continental. That doesn't include the work that they're trying to cram in for Bassam's Hollow and the rest of that area. And so our requirement was 584 kilograms to be good doobies, right? And we're focusing all our attention on this one area. To me, it's conspicuous that this is the area that they can develop. I can't tell you that, this is a plot to develop. But if I'm sitting back and trying to understand what our mission is with this project, if it's to clean water, I'm scratching my head. And so going forward, I would just like to have, a clear, where are we going and be perfectly transparent and open with the public. We're spending a chunk of money for GHD. I supported the effort to reevaluate the CWMP. And, within 30 minutes, we're talking about moving ahead with sewers in Pleasant Bay, Round Cove, and the rest of it. And I'm just feeling, okay, is this a genuine, what is our mission? Is this genuinely about, or are we just rubber stamp? Are we trying to placate concerned citizens? Is this a genuine, honest reevaluation that has teeth, that says, okay, well, you know what? This is a serious crisis. We need to curb growth here, or, whatever. I just want an honest evaluation. I'm okay if we do sewers. I believe we need sewers in certain areas. And so that's the gist of my comments. And I really appreciate what GHD is going to embark on. And so far, I've seen good stuff from them. So thank you.
Dan, did you have a comment?
Yeah, if anyone's, Sandy and I have been discussing this for a couple years, and for anyone out there who doesn't fully know what an attenuation rate is, I just want to kind of define that, just so everyone has a better understanding. So the attenuation rate is effectively how efficient the environment is at absorbing nitrogen as it migrates to Muddy Creek. So that's a biological, natural process that was measured through work that was done by UMass, and those attenuation rates are impacted through through those models, and they changed from 2010 to 2021, rather.
Just public input, remember?
Yeah.
So
No, I
this
just
is one-
wanted.
Understood, but
Yeah.
I just want to make sure the rest of the folks have a chance to.
I think it's helpful.
It is,
Because
yeah.
attenuation rates is, people
Confusing.
don't understand. So I think that's good. One thing, sorry, just to put these numbers kind of on a map, because people look at the numbers like, what does 1,700 mean? And Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically a parcel in Harwich might remove 6 kilograms per year. Is that correct?
That's the average.
That's
per
the
parcel.
average. It might be 4, it might be 6, it might be 7. It all depends how much nitrogen, we have 5 kids, we're probably a little higher. put that in perspective. So if, and again, these numbers might not be exact, dynamics change, but 1,700 versus our target of 584, do the maths. That's a lot of homes that maybe didn't need to be sewered. So I just want to put this frame it, because again, charts and numbers, I like numbers. Most people don't. Thanks.
My only comment to that, Sandy, you made a mention of a different water use when evaluating technologies, the 200, 150. We're going to have a singular number that we use for all the technologies, and we'll have a description of how we came to that number based on relevant things. So absolutely, it's going to be one number that we use for it. So, yep. Next.
Hi, Carol Porter, 14 Harold Street, Harwichport. First, I want to thank the previous speakers for their caring about the future of Harwich. I appreciate it. And also, I just would like to mention that maybe this informational meetings aren't advertised enough. It would be, I get an email, so I know about it, but it might be nice to spread the word a little more. But my questions is, first of all, you showed a chart with phases and dates, but that's the old one,
Yes,
right?
correct.
That had, YDH partnership and everything.
Yeah.
And so that's
the old
We shouldn't
one.
go by that, yeah.
No, and that was part of the reason for showing that is, we're producing new charts, to match,
Right.
like we had in the past, sorry.
And when will those?
So the duration of this scope, I believe that we're hoping to get everything wrapped up by this summer.
Okay.
Regulatory approval may take some time longer than that, but the maps would be completed at that time.
Oh, good to know. So I won't be looking for them every week.
Me too.
Thanks. And my other question was, are the Beach Plum condominiums included in the plan when it comes down Doan Road? I know we're not getting answers today, but I just would like that question out there
Okay.
in Harwichport, all right?
Could you follow up with after, and I can get you a better answer to the Dawn Road question?
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Anyone next? Thank you.
Yes, hi. Dan McLennan's my name, and I'm probably not going to be getting an answer. I don't have a lot of input. I do appreciate the comments I heard earlier, however, it's an education for me. My wife and I bought a home in 2018, and we live on Huckleberry Path, that's the street. And my understanding was, and it has to do more, I guess, with the scheduling and perhaps with what this lady was asking you about, new maps, new schedules, and so on. But I've been trying to get a kind of an understanding as to when certain roads might be addressed. I did make a call and asked about updates. I said, the woman I spoke to at the department said that welcome packets and information packets will be going out, I guess targeting, it's on the doorstep, right? And you'll be getting this information soon. But then I read something in the paper about for those streets who are already lined. And I haven't seen anybody on the street in the last 3 or 4 years. So I don't know, I guess if my question's going to be answered in the new information that you spoke about, scheduling and so on, I just would
Yes.
like to learn a little bit more about the specific neighborhoods.
Yeah, so Huckleberry Path is one of the many streets that was pulled out of Phase 2 when the Contract 1 bid came in over estimates. So where things stand, I guess the best I can explain it right now is presently Huckleberry Path is located in the Lower Muddy Creek subwatershed. The 2021 attenuation rates suggest that we are pretty much satisfied with removing the amount of nitrogen that we need to remove in Lower Muddy Creek. So we have removed 983 out of a required 986. So this gets to one of the things that Sandy was talking about, are we doing this for the environment, development, growth, those sorts of things. So one of the things with the 2021 attenuation rates, those were born out of a SMAST report from UMass, and the attenuation rates were different than the ones in 2010, significantly different, calling into question the validity of the 2010 report. So what we're going through right now is looking at the attenuation rates from 2006, 2010, 2021. The Pleasant Bay Alliance has contracted with a third party to review the attenuation rate data to validate or invalidate what we're finding here in 2021. The Board of Selectmen has advised me that, or they said that they would like to wait until we have the, in addition to the third-party review, the Pleasant Bay Alliance also contracted with UMass to do another linked watershed model. That new linked watershed model should give us kind of the final variable, if you will, in determining whether or not the 2021 data is correct. Once we have that information, would be at the time I could answer whether or not we should do Huckleberry Path. It's a long-winded answer, but that's,
No, I get the point. I get to the point is you're reassessing the need.
yeah.
I appreciate the answer.
I'm sorry. So you were saying that there's a chance that where you were going to put sewers in, now you might not?
So,
You might not know that until several months from now?
yes.
But we also have the issue of some houses have impact where we can't get permits until the systems are improved, but we're waiting for the town to kind of move forward. So how should we?
And what street were you on?
Vicksburg.
Vicksburg, okay, yeah, so that's, I may have spoke to you on the phone, or I've definitely spoke to someone on the phone from Vicksburg, Williamsburg neighborhood, because that was one of the streets, half of that neighborhood was cut out when Phase 2. So that, like Huckleberry Path, is in the Lower Muddy Creek watershed, and would be looking for that data from that linked watershed model this summer to define whether or not we need to do that street.
Okay.
Oh, yes, sorry. Name, yep.
Kim Rowland.
Yeah, just a reminder, if everyone can say their name at the very start of their comment and address, so our engineer that's documenting these can keep record. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Joanne Clancy, Cemetery Road. When we first started this, they said the cost to hook up would be about $7,000. With lack of supplies now, what is the cost going to be?
So, we have officially 2 people connected in Harwich to the sewer system. I know one of those properties was about $4,500 to connect. So, it can vary anywhere from, I would say on the low end, $3,500, $4,500. On the high end, I've seen as high as $20,000. The high end is more the, if you're repairing a driveway, going through a rock wall, landscape, it's
I don't
usually
care
because of
about
those other
the
costs.
landscape. I have to go 26 feet through my cellar or tear down my deck because the short way, I have gas, water, and a utility pole. You've been to my house. And I'm just,
Right.
I mean, I have money put away for it, but a lot of people don't.
I would, yeah, and I guess the issue, I think right now, supply chain is getting the pipe. I know Robert Hour's been waiting for, I think, 2 months right now for a load of PVC pipe. We've been waiting just in the water department, months and months and months.
Can we extend the 2-year deadline because of supply shortages?
I don't have the authority to do that, but I think that if supply chain impacts the ability of residents to get connected, that would be a valid reason that the board would consider extending that order. And I would be willing to make that recommendation should that be an issue for people.
As an old town employee, retired, Paula Champagne, our health director back in the mid-2000s, was pushing Allen's Harbor and the harbor areas, not Pleasant Bay. And we figured that was put off because the rich people down there didn't want their yards and roads dug up. That's just old-time stuff. And I have another question. What about? Can you use the mic, please? Oh, I can't. Also, this is just, what about the fertilizers people are using on their lawns? My in-laws bought the original hunting lodge on Bucks Pond in the early 50s. My sister-in-laws still own it. And the water there, as many people know, has been slowly not drinking water safe anymore. And they've always felt a lot of it was the fertilizers being used on the lawns. Will that ever be changed in town?
So, great question. And it's going to be another long-winded answer. I apologize. So, this past year, the Board of Health actually did adopt a fertilizer bylaw. That said, we were regretfully informed from town's legal counsel that the town itself does not have the authority to enact such a regulation because the local bylaw is preempted by the Mass Department of DAR. Is it Agricultural Resources? So we legally cannot adopt a fertilizer bylaw. That said, back up slide. This is our watershed permit with the Pleasant Bay Alliance. One of our permit conditions has us adopting a fertilizer bylaw. Now that we know from the state that we can, or from our legal counsel, we can no longer do that, I have reached out to DEP to see what we can do to satisfy our permit and retain those credits. So it's still very much in its infancy, but my plan is to work with DEP to develop a public, PR campaign and public education campaign with respect to fertilizer use and, get that to a mutually agreeable point with the regulators that they would allow us to keep our fertilizer bylaw. So it is something that I am planning on working on.
Thank you.
And I did, just to add to that, I did get a few phone calls from residents. At the first public input session, I explained how I use microclover to landscape some of the areas around my house. And while it worked really good in the fall, unfortunately, with the recent snow melt, microclover does not do good under a 2-foot pile of snowdrift. So the question I was asked was, something like a microclover suitable for a front yard, like a low maintenance ground cover, right? Something that doesn't require extensive fertilizer but still has an aesthetic appeal. Something like a microclover, the root structure is so delicate, it's not good for foot traffic, things like that. So I'm looking into, for residents that are interested, what some options are for grass, ground cover that grows well without the use of a fertilizer and abundance of excess nutrients. So those are some questions I've received already, and we're looking into that.
Hi, Lori Gillespie Lee, Old Heritage Way. We have one of the hooked up, not my property, but one of the ones on our road. But I had a couple of questions. Since we're revisiting this and relooking at this, why were the mailings sent out now? Why would we start that 2-year clock until we've done this research and really reviewed everything? That's one of my questions. You don't have to answer it now if you don't want. It's up to you. But I was curious because we all got that mailing. Second thing is, I work for the town of Eastham. We do have a fertilizer bylaw in there. So I think Harwich should push for that and really get one in because that is a big one around. I used to live on John Joseph Pond and I know the impact.
So the fertilizer bylaw, just comment on that before going back to the other one.
Mm-hmm.
The state regulation was such that if you had a fertilizer bylaw in place prior to 2012, you were
Okay.
grandfathered in. So Harwich only adopting it this past year wasn't
Okay.
grandfathered. So that was the issue on that. And then with respect to the, why did we send out the mailing? Well, I guess, the town spent $18 or plus million putting the pipes in the ground, purchasing capacity of the treatment plant. The nitrogen reduction and the benefits from that don't go away. Would be really throwing money away if
Right.
we didn't use it. Yeah.
Right. I was just shocked to get it that soon since I knew we were still kind of reevaluating the work that was done and trying to get our hands around it. But
And two, we're really, looking back, there were definitely some failures that occurred in phase 2, and the CWMP and the revisions are really looking from this point forward.
right.
With respect to if there was any future work to be done in Upper or Lower Muddy Creek, that would be evaluated through this process.
Okay. My last question, sorry to bother, is betterments. I'm sorry, betterments. Again, in the town of Eastham, we use betterments to help people with the water system that's just going in there and with their private roads for some maintenance. Have we looked at betterments to help people pay for these systems? I think it would help a lot of people, and I know it has to go through legislation. It takes a year or two, and I've asked this before, and I've never had an answer, and I've never seen anything being done by the Board of Selectmen to start a betterment program for this.
So I believe it was one of your water wastewater commissioners, Noreen, who,
Donahue?
yeah, who, I believe her and I started a discussion recently about betterments.
Okay.
I wasn't part of the development of the first CWMP. I don't know how
Right.
much they looked into that. I know there was a cost recovery committee, but it's definitely something that if the town wants to do, betterments, and think that that's a better way to do it, then.
Well, this will be my pitch to ask them to look at it and get it onto the May warrant, because it does have to go to town meeting, and it has to go up through the Senate and everything to pass, okay? And it will take a year or two.
When you talk about betterments, are you referring to the betterments for the connections for the houses that, okay.
Yes, if people could use a betterment process to hook up to the systems, I think they'd be more willing to do it. It'd be a smaller payment, no interest. The Barnstable County septic system is a 5% interest rate.
Oh, well, if I may add on
Oh,
that.
did that change?
I am in discussions with them currently. We've been going back and forth for several months. They actually just hired a financial advisor to do a pro forma. We are trying to get those loans offered at 0% to residents. So
Awesome.
we are actively pursuing that now.
Okay.
So
So a betterment would do the same thing, and if it fails through, I would really push for that. Thank you.
Some of us have not gotten letters yet.
So, just to clarify, if I can go back, the only letters that have been sent out so far are the ones highlighted in blue. We sent those letters out certified mail. So, the reason we've only sent them to the blue parcels is we have only received the approval to operate the collection system for contract 1 of phase 2. We had DEP out last month to do the last final inspections. We're waiting on that approval to start that collection system on contract 2. Once we get that letter, we'll be mailing out the remaining letters for the red parcels.
I'm sorry, just when you said you sent them out certified mail, which is very expensive, they don't even get the information off for you to even see that I got it. So.
Oh, yeah, it's supposed to be signed certified. That's what we paid for.
Hi, Dan. Linda Sabula. I live on Route 28. Could you perhaps give a little update on where we are with the treatments going or not going to the Chatham plant? And that while people are concerned about this 2-year, whether or not the 2 years should start, give us a little update on when we have to start paying as a town for our percentage of operating that plant, because I think that would be a little bit of interesting information. And I was on the board when some of this was happening, and we did discuss at the time the possibility of betterments, of taking the town taking out loans, and then people being allowed to do the betterments. So that was discussed at the time, and we were waiting to see how this was going to all rack out.
So you were saying that the treatment at the Chatham plant, or when people should connect, or how?
Well, there was the question of why do we have to connect now? Why don't we wait for this reevaluation? And we have some obligations to start
Right.
paying for that treatment plant, whether we're connected or not. So that
Yes.
drives some of this 2 years.
See, yeah, so what Linda was talking about, so we have an intermunicipal agreement with the town of Chatham. So part of that agreement was the purchase of 300,000 gallons of capacity at their wastewater treatment facility, which equates to 23.08% of their total plant. For that, we have to pay fixed expenses and flow variable expenses as part of Harwich's supporting the operation of the treatment plant. So now that we are connected, to Chatham, the system's ready to go, we're going to be on the hook for paying those fixed and flow variable expenses with the town of Chatham. So revenue generated by the sewer customers will be put towards offsetting those expenses. Presently, the customer base is not sufficient to fully fund the operation of the sewer enterprise and offset the full cost of operation. So there is currently a general fund subsidy that balances the sewer operating budget. So if that answers that. Is that the? Welcome anyone else up for any other?
Hi, my name is John Ketchum. I live in South Harwich on Skinnequit Pond. First of all, I'd like to just, as other people have, thank the McClartys for the enormous amount of work they've been doing, and I think it's a critical part of the process for citizens who are not directly involved to closely scrutinize the work that's being done and provide feedback. Without that open examination of things, a lot of things can get passed over. My concern is about fresh water in Harwich. I was not at the previous meeting, but I watched the entire video, and as Russ said, almost the entire meeting, or maybe the entire meeting, was taken up by residents of the Great Sand Lakes area concerned about lack of sewering there, and I understand their concern, but I just want to get up and talk because it's clearly not just the Great Sand Lakes as freshwater resources in Harwich that are under threat. Skinnequit Pond, where I live, is actually in pretty bad shape right now, due in part to historic land use in the area, but also, of course, for the other things that have been discussed here, which are input from septic systems and input from overuse or use of fertilizers and other chemicals on people's lawns. All those things need to be addressed. And I'd just like to comment that, which hasn't come up here, that the town of Harwich has been engaged for at least the last 2 decades in collecting data about its freshwater ponds through a program called PALS, which has been run by SMAST and in Harwich, supervised by Heinz Proft, the Natural Resources Director, and citizens in the area of the freshwater ponds have been people responsible for collecting water samples and physical measurements during the summer months. There's an enormous amount of data there which has not really been leveraged by the town of Harwich to really understand what's going on in the freshwater ponds, really understand the biology and the biological changes that are happening in the freshwater ponds. I think it's critical that part of any planning in Harwich has to closely examine the existing data and consider what additional data needs to be taken, what additional study needs to be made of the existing freshwater resources. So that's my main point, and I'm on Skinnequit Pond. I've observed pretty closely what's going on there. I haven't been there. I've been there for 10 years or so. There were serious problems prior to my moving there, and there continue to be problems there. And I know there are other ponds in Harwich that are similarly degraded. Some ponds haven't gotten there yet, but they're under threat, as those from the Great Sand Lakes have discussed. And I think that removing the inputs from septic systems, from overuse of nitrogen and phosphorus-rich fertilizers would all be good things, but there are other things that need to be done before the ponds like Skinnequit completely die, and I would like to see all those things considered in this revision to the wastewater plan. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for listening. I'm Dave Callahan, 131 Clearwater Drive, and I've been a summer resident here in Harwich for my entire life. And finally, in 2012, my wife and I retired to our summer home. I'm the current president of the Great Sand Lakes Association, but what I am about to say is not been passed by the board, has not been approved by the board, and so I will please treat it that way. I cannot say this is an official statement. There's a saying often attributed to Winston Churchill, but it's actually attributable to philosopher George Santayana, that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. My neighbor spoke quite vociferously at the meeting on the 27th, and I don't want to repeat what they've said. In fact, I want to address something which is basically why we are here at all. Due to the high groundwater in the spring of 1998, John Joseph Pond, Bucks Pond, Kitty's Pond, and because of 3 inches of water on Rainbow Way, Sand Lake, the 4 ponds were really one pond from John Joseph Road all the way over to Route 39. According to the archives of our association, the town's interest in the water and water quality really took off on the 4th of July weekend in July, 1998, excuse me, when water quality tests conducted by the Board of Health for the beaches that were there measured unusually high E. coli counts. On Friday, July 3rd, a special emergency Board of Health meeting was held to discuss closing the pond, because it was one big pond, not 4. Paula Champlain, the health director at the time, pointed out E. coli counts had to have a reading of 235. I think these are colonies, in order to be swimmable. And the counts at Association Beach and Clearwater Drive, which were usually 10, were at 20, which was okay. Over at Pleasant Park and Bucks Pond Road Beach, it was 180. Getting a little high, acceptable, but not great. However, on the Rainbow Way side of Kitty's Pond, it was 804, and in Sand Lake, it was too numerous to count. The cause was flooding of cesspools in low-lying lots that the town approved in the 1950s. The vote to close the beach wasn't taken by the Board of Health until the regular meeting on July 7th, at which time the vote was tied and the motion failed. Subsequent testing showed that E. coli counts were acceptable, and the beaches remained open for at least part of the summer. I can't remember the actual, I don't have the actual dates. Nevertheless, this incident was a call to action for both Great Sand Lakes and the town. In late July, the selectmen voted to create a task force on pollution, which I believe morphed into the Water Quality Task Force and eventually culminated with the Cwmp. Throughout it all, even today, the Board of Directors of Great Sand Lakes and our Association and our members have done what we could to delay the degradations of the water in our ponds. In 1998, the GSLA created its own special liaison committee to work with the town. One of its members, David Mulligan, who was a former Board of Health Commissioner for the state, represented the committee on the original Board of Health Task Force on Pollution that had been created by the selectmen in July. The GSLA Special Liaison Committee worked with the town and county to get low-term, low-interest loans for our residents. And I'm glad to hear that you're at least looking into betterment programs and some other things along those lines. For over 20 years, we've coordinated citizen scientist teams, like they have at Skinnequit Pond, to conduct the water quality sampling for the Natural Resources Officer and SMAST. We provided multiple easements over our properties to allow the town to improve drainage from road runoff. In the last 15 years, we have worked with the town to identify locations for catch basins to eliminate road runoff, including a recent commitment for 2 more to be installed this spring. We have continually stressed to our residents that our number 1 priority is protection of the ponds. Wonderful resource that we are so pleased to be responsible for. And we continue our efforts to educate them on what we all must do to protect this wonderful resource. From the first GSLA meetings I attended back around 2000, I had been a summer resident, but we rented it a lot, we weren't around, and I really didn't start attending them until about 2000. I remember hearing Tony Pirro, who was then the president of the association, and George Myers, another board member, preach about the phosphorus plume that was being created by septic systems from the north, which is the direction the water flows down from the Hawk's Nest area down through our ponds and then down to the wells in Thompson's Field and on Depot Road. They noted the impact it would have on our ponds, and with sewering being the only way to head it off before it happened. Although I should say that Tony eventually did put in an IA system, and I think he's the only one in our neighborhood that has one of those. I have to admit, as a seasonal resident, I did not understand the issue well enough, and I figured, well, somebody else is handling it. Turned out my assumption was wrong. Along the way, it appears that the threat of a lawsuit from the Conservation Law Foundation shifted the water quality emphasis from freshwater to saltwater. And that's a problem that we now are encountering. Worse, when the CWMP was developed, things that we were concerned about that had been of higher interest earlier in the process got shoved to the back of the line. And with a treatment, unspecified treatment, but I assume it was alum was in mind, obviously to solve a serious problem with phosphorus occurring in 2035. That's 35 years from now. Or no, excuse me, 13 years from now. The sewers were pushed along Queen Anne, were pushed to the final phase 8, beginning in 2040, with a caveat that it might not be needed and only if necessary. Of course, it doesn't say regardless of whether we run out of budget money. So, needless to say, that I and many of our residents believe that sewering is needed, and the need actually is now. For me, it began really this fall of how serious a problem we have when we had that 7-inch rainfall in September. I was away that weekend. People started sending me photos of an algae bloom that was occurring on the beach in Clearwater Drive. Worse was 2 weeks later, smaller rainfall. I walked out on the beach to find algae bloom running about 300 feet long, about 5 feet wide. Clearly, the phosphorus has built up over the time, and the blooms have finally begun. I've never seen them in my 25 years or whatever, 26 years of living on the pond. In the last few months, the Great Sand Lakes Water Quality Committee has analyzed the data we've collected for SMAST, because we've talked about, several people have talked about that, and we actually had somebody come down and do graph it, and we did a wonderful job, Ann Frechette, to graph what's happening to phosphorus and nitrogen and the other figures that came back. And it's pretty clear to me that there are increasing phosphorus levels, particularly over the last few years. So I'm not surprised that these blooms are beginning to occur. And I don't expect them personally that they are going to get any better unless we take some action, and we take that action now. So I'm here to implore the group conducting this review, and I really appreciate the fact that you're listening, that we fix the error that put Queen Anne Road, Great Sand Lakes area in the last stage of the CWMP. Sewering is needed as soon as possible if we were to avoid the pea soup and fish kills that occurred on Long Pond and on Hinckley's Pond. As the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And if we do not invest in prevention now, the cost will be far higher in terms of damage to the ponds and the expensive solutions to repair that damage. Thank you.
I can add just a few comments to that. So you mentioned you had some negative effects after rain events. The first event years ago where all 4 ponds became one, you had a high bacteria count. So of course, from septic systems coming in. And then you mentioned that the town's going to be putting a couple catch basins in. So typically catch basins, they collect the surface runoff from the road. It goes into the basin, and it either goes down a pipe and get discharged somewhere, or the catch basin has a bunch of holes in it. It's called a leaching pit. Kind of the same theory as a Title V, right? You're taking rainwater and putting it into that catch basin. So while leaching is an effective means to remove bacteria as that water goes through sand and you pull it out, any phosphorus or nitrogen that's in the road runoff, it's just going to go right through and back. And so while catch basins are good for bacterial concerns, which is what you get after the high rains. Now, again, your cause was by some of the septic systems, which the catch basins aren't going to help with that at all because that's coming in through the groundwater. That's why we always fall back and say the education behind the fertilizer, because the main sources of phosphorus and nitrogen that come from stormwater is the fertilizer runoff that goes into catch basins and either travels through the soil media to the pond, or in some cases there's a direct pipe out to a pond or a harbor or something like that. And the best way to get those out is to not put them in the first place, which is the whole public education. And that falls, that's when everybody has to be proactive about that. I know I've mentioned Santuit Pond in Mashpee before. I watched a presentation that they gave. It was online a few years ago. And it had specifically, you mentioned the 7.7 rain event that caused the start of some algae blooms. So what happens is, you have a freshwater pond and you have it, Mother Nature by design. There's naturally occurring phosphorus and nitrogen that comes in through decomposition materials, things like that. But then through inhabitation, we've put in the man-made inputs, which are the stormwater, septic tanks, all that sort of stuff. When you had that 7 inches of rain, that brought so much material just from the native ground around it, it likely elevated the phosphorus level enough to start seeing these small algae blooms, which means there's a concentration of phosphorus in the water that can support this. You add that with the right conditions, high temperature, low wind, stagnant water, that's when you start to develop these blooms. And you're right, you want to be reactive, not proactive to algae blooms. Once you start getting repeated blooms, it's very difficult to... Proactive, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan.
Not
Y'all knew what I was trying to get at here. So then we had the solar bees. I noticed in Skinnaquit Pond there was a solar bee put in. So 5 or 6 were put in at Santuit Pond 5 or 6 years ago, and they worked fantastic. I'm a very avid freshwater fisherman, so I've been on a lot of these lakes for the last 20 years and seen with my own eyes the decline, and I'm not going to interject personal opinion into these matters, but in Santuit Pond, they put in 5 or 6 of these solar bees, and for about 4 or 5 years, there wasn't an algae bloom. And Santuit Pond is, that pond before the solar bees, it was closed from June, July, all the way through November, December. I've worked at another pond in Halifax that had over 2 million cell count. I think the threshold is 70,000. The solar bees worked very well for about 5 years, and then at Santuit Pond, they had a 4, 5, 6 inches of rain on a very, very short, very high-intensity rain event that really brought in a lot of phosphorus into the pond. And that was about 2 or 3 years ago, and ever since then, the pond has had, even with the solar bees in there, it's had algae blooms to the point where it's June through whenever the water cools off enough for the algae to go away. So it's months. And pond's closed for months, can't have dogs, residents, can't take your boat out there, can't even cast a fishing line, it gets in your fishing reel, the kids can't go down. I mean, the resource is closed. So we don't want it to get to that point. Understood. I know the town of Mashpee put an order in to have, I believe, the homes around Santuit to have the septic tanks pumped. So if homeowners are wondering, what can we do now to help out Skinnaquit or be proactive, you can get your septic tanks pumped. Might cost you $300 or $400, but if you haven't done it for a few years, recommend doing it. So Yeah, understood the concerns with the freshwater ponds. Thank you.
Just one little other thing about ponds that I wanted to add. I like the idea of more aggressive education throughout the town about fertilizer, but also soap and detergents.
Sure.
Those contribute a lot of phosphorus that gets into the pond. So you can't. There are products available in just a regular supermarket, not even anything special, and they'll say on it phosphate free. That helps your pond too.
And I can't tell you how many times I drive down the street on a nice Saturday, warm Sunday. You see someone washing the car with the trail of soap
And the
bubbles
soap
going down
on
the
it.
road into anything you're spraying on the car and washing off. I used to do it too. That's what you did on a Friday. You get the car all shined up, out you go. But, we have to be more conscious as homeowners. Anything that all these products, and then we hear things about PFAS, all these forever chemicals. I mean, now's the time we really need to start paying attention as a group to what we're doing. And keep in mind, when you're washing a car, you're using water on your lawn, look at where it's going. I can't tell you how many times you drive down the street, you see a whole plume of water coming off a driveway from a construction activity, from washing cars, going right into a catch basin. There's a pond across the street.
Broken irrigation head, make
I
sure you
mean-
fix those as the water superintendent, please.
I just can't imagine, if you're spraying Armor All and all these products in your car, then you hose it off, that's going,
Yeah.
and that's education. But maybe someone just didn't even know that they were doing it. Oh, thanks for telling me, I won't do it again. It can be as simple as that.
Right, and I wanted to add that I'd love to see the education include the PFAS, the microplastics, and other CECs.
We have to, yeah.
And there's a man named Peter, I can't remember, sorry. He has a house on Pilgrim Lake, and he has this company, Terra Firma, and he does a lot with the way you can create plantings that absorb water runoff around the
Vegetate
edge of your
swales.
property.
Yeah, rain
Even
gardens,
water that's
biosource.
running down a sloped yard towards the road. That's going to go into that catch basin, that's going to go into that pond. So you can, they call them rain gardens, but it can be a veggie garden. It can be a swale. It's a way of terracing. Or there's a lot of things that you can do with your
Cascading pools, correct.
landscaping.
Any type of vegetation that can soak that, whether it's grass, whether
Yeah.
it's flowers, it soaks those nutrients up. And we call it green infrastructure in the world of stormwater. It's using nature to remove those
Because
elements.
phosphorus is actually a valuable nutrient. It's not something we would like to just get rid of. For agricultural use in farmland, it's actually becoming rare. And if we had a way to recycle that phosphorus that comes to us in our food from the agricultural soils, they really need that phosphorus back on the agricultural soils. So, letting ourselves be part of a cycle instead of thinking that we just have a right to consume and dump the way we're used to, we're starting to see these devastating effects because we think that this is just the way humans live. We consume it and we dump it. We have to start thinking like a cycle. And I think all of that could be tied into public education efforts, to make a really big picture. People can get involved in the solution in that way.
Thanks.
My name is Abir James. I'm on Route 137. I'm just wondering, when did the project finish, the first phase?
Phase 2, Contract 1, the final completion, or when did we get the letter?
I-
What?
My next question is, why did the town wait till now to send the notices?
I can answer.
Personally, I could have bought the material. I have 2 houses and I have 200 linear feet of pipes. I could have stockpiled that material at half the cost.
Yeah, no, I
Now
hear
it's
you.
gonna cost me probably triple, if not double.
So we got the approval letter from DEP on October 18th. The issue with sending the packets out immediately thereafter was we didn't have a contract set up yet with Weston and Sampson through the town of Chatham for the operation of the collection system. So that was a process that took far longer than it was supposed to. It was a process that I started embarking on well over a year ago, and it was very frustrating to get through, but the packets are out now. But October 18th was the day that we could have
My
had.
follow-up question, why did you guys wait till the project is done? Why didn't you go in parallel? The project.
We have to
date
get-
is this date.
We have to get approval from DEP.
But it's coming, the project was done, You're gonna get it regardless.
But we can't send a letter out to you and say, hey, you can hook up until we have
Because
DEP's
nobody's
approval in
maintaining
hand.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sharon Flieger, Harwich. I'm also on the Board of Health, so I want to get that out in the open, and I'm not speaking for the Board of Health. I just want to touch on the fertilizer regulation business. We did have fertilizer regulations on the website, and it was out on the Board of Health. After legal came in and said we were not allowed to use the term regulation or bylaw, we pulled that. And basically, we have on the site now what is in MDR, which is the regulations we were required to follow. Going back to the CWMP, the town, and I was not involved with it at the time, had chose not to do bylaws, all right? One of the reasons is there's really no way to go out and check on what everybody's doing. You can't do that. So we were not allowed to use that term. So right now, under policy for nutrients, it is on our website. Listening to this, it might make more sense to also include it on the wastewater site because people might be looking at it there. The fact that we're coming into the spring, and I don't know if this is possible, maybe we could put it on the homepage as far as nutrient regulations. They follow the state regulations from MDR, basically, of what to use, how much to use, and when to use it. So for those people that really want to contribute to using less nitrogen and do things in the proper way, that information is there. You just may not know where to look for it. So I wanted to make sure that you do know that it's there. Maybe we can also put it on the wastewater site and then possibly also on the homepage. Would make it really easy for somebody to go to the town of Harwich. They want to say, what can I or shouldn't I be doing with fertilizer regulations or policies? And that information is there. That's all. Thank you.
Excellent.
Hi, Judith Underwood. I'm on the Affordable Housing Trust, and I'm also one of your water and wastewater commissioners. And with wearing that hat, I just want to thank you all, and I want to thank everybody here for coming in. I think this is a really important dialogue, and Alan, shout out to you for really longevity of knowledge of this town. And then I want to take that hat off for a moment. As a homeowner, I live on Sisson Road, and a mother of 2 kids, 17 and 21, that actually want to live here when they're older. And so by training, I'm an educator, and I'm a political scientist. And I want to just address the politics of this, and I want to thank the McClartys for all their work. It's stupendous. 10 years ago, yes, absolutely, absolutely. 10 years ago, when I started Cape Cod Community College to revamp their environmental technology program, the president asked me to sit in on a committee for him. My background was solar and different kinds of environmental technology. And this committee was the Regional Wastewater Task Force that came out. It was run through the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. It had stakeholders from every imaginable area of the Cape. And within 6 months, I was sending a note to our Secretary for Energy and Environmental Affairs like, oh my God, I just did not know so much about water. And within 6 months, I learned an enormous amount. So I'm telling you all, I don't have a science background. I don't have an engineering background. I work with scientists and technologists now, but I have a very good understanding of all of this. And you all in this room and listening, you can learn. You can learn this, absolutely. And I want to challenge our Board of Selectmen to reduce the politics around this and do it through transparency. I was respectfully disappointed to see that our town planner was making comments in an article like he did when he is also part of the group, the committee that is going to choose the, I forget what the local planning committee that's going to work with this, yes, exactly, to do long-term planning about our town. So when I, back in the day, voted for that first big check for sewering, you know, I got up with my educational background and said, this is really important for our environment. And at that same meeting, the Board of Selectmen publicly said that they would not build more, and we have to go back and look at the actual verbiage that they said. Sorry? Flow neutral. Yes, that they would not build sewering to add in. They would build sewering for what was there first. That was what was agreed upon before we all took that vote to write that very large check, not the check to do the studies, right? So I want to call on our elected officials to please step up to that bat of transparency, to reduce anxiety. My phone has been blowing up this week with people calling and emailing me, and they're just and I'm sending them to you guys because you are awesome. But they're worried about the things that they cannot control. They understand that you guys can control the engineering, right? But they feel at a loss about the politics piece. And that's a shame. We're a small town. You know, that can change. That can change. So I'm putting, thank you, and thank you.
Welcome anyone else to come up. In the absence of any volunteers, I guess we can conclude the public input session. Happy to hang around and chat if anyone wants to talk after, but we can call this one done.
Thanks everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you.